Hello everybody, welcome back. This is a tropical update for September 27th. We're currently watching Category 3 Major Hurricane Ian making its way off of Cuba, now heading towards Florida. Hourly updates now from the Hurricane Center on a rapidly intensifying Hurricane Ian, bringing life-threatening, devastating, and extreme impacts to Florida, especially that western coast near and south, north of Tampa, all around Tampa, basically, is what I'm trying to say. We're also watching 99L for potential fill-in. I didn't update the position of 99L because, to be honest, it really doesn't matter today. Today, the only thing, and for the next few days, the only thing that matters is Ian. We've now upgraded the impact map to extreme, just south of Tampa, heading down a little bit further to the south due to storm surge likely in excess of 12 feet in that purple area. Perhaps major hurricane force winds anywhere in that pink area. We could see rainfall in excess of at least a foot in the red areas, perhaps even more isolated amounts to 2 feet possible in those red areas. In the orange area, we could have potential hurricane force winds as well as significant rainfall, well in at least 6 to 8 inches, probably over much of that area. In decreasing impacts, of course, as you head out with color. But again, significant impacts are expected to Florida. We can't overstate that enough. As you see, Ian, it just moved over Cuba. Does it look like this thing moved over Cuba? No, it doesn't. That's the answer to the question today. As you can see, looking at the cone here, major concerns. It's near Florida now. In fact, it's close enough for us to detect it on American radars. On the Key West radar, we can see the center of the storm already. We'll be able to see the center of the storm from now until Saturday morning. And from now until Friday evening, the storm will be over Florida. I mean, it's already bringing a lot of rain. I'll show you guys the radar in a moment to South Florida, and it will continue to do so through Friday or Saturday. Significant rain is expected. The good news is a little bit of dry air will come in on the south side of the storm once it makes its way just south of Tampa, where it will make landfall as a Category 3 hurricane Wednesday night. But note, from Wednesday night to Thursday night, this storm only traverses half of Florida, half of the width of Florida, not to mention the length. It's only about a third or a quarter of the length of Florida. So this storm really does not move over the course from about Wednesday morning to Friday morning. This storm doesn't do a whole lot other than sit over Florida. Again, flooding is a huge concern. Widespread 12 inches, isolated amounts to 2 feet. Storm surge is going to be up to 12 feet in areas, 4 feet of storm surge over much of the area, with a tropical storm warning here, as well as tropical storm warnings north of Orlando here on the Atlantic side of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Wide swath of winds. As you can see, the tropical storm force wind field already extends over about a third of Cuba. If we translate that into Florida, that's most of the Florida Peninsula already, and those winds will continue to grow in size. Tornadoes are also possible, with a slight risk of tornadoes over the next 3 days, according to the Hurricane Center. Let's talk about all those one by one. Here's the radar. As I mentioned, significant rain already occurring over South Florida, where a tornado watch is currently in effect for this area due to those outer rain bands perhaps having brief embedded tornadoes, likely EF1 at most, maybe EF2. Also worth noting is this recon mission. There are multiple planes in the storm right now. The latest pass, as you can see, 963, 961, 957. The Hurricane Center has the advisory at 955. This pressure is dropping like a rock, and as the pressure drops, the wind increases accordingly. So that wind expected to increase into a Category 4 strength before making landfall in Florida. Again, an extreme storm, a storm that will be remembered for a very long time along the west coast of Florida. Again, tropical storm watches and warnings, hurricane watches and warnings, storm surge watches and warnings across the entirety of the Florida coast, at least in the peninsula part of the coast. There are watches and warnings for all of those locations in the peninsula and the Keys all the way up to central South Carolina as we speak. Flooding rain, also a big concern, especially in the Tampa area. Extreme flooding is likely with at least 1.5 feet of rain in much of this area, perhaps isolated amounts into the 2 foot range. And again, significant rain still over 1/2 foot, basically along the coastline of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and anywhere within the main body of Florida due to this storm. So significant rain is expected with this storm. Storm surge, also a big concern. As we can see here, the storm surge is possible everywhere from halfway across the panhandle, around all of Florida, all of the Georgia coastline, in half of the south half of the South Carolina coastline. Would not be surprised if we see the north half get a little bit of action later on, especially if this swings out over sea again. If I'll go back, real quick to show you this. Look at this. The storm's going to cross Florida, and then it could go back over the ocean real quick, although the moment it keeps it slightly over the coast. And so that's just worth noting. So again, storm surge is a big concern, 4 to 6 feet over the southern Georgia area, still 3 feet possible along much of the Atlantic coast, not to mention the Gulf Coast, where 3 feet is about the norm for anybody on the west coast, non-panhandle of Florida, and then anywhere up 8 to 12 feet possible south of Tampa. Again, the good news, if there is any good news with this storm, is the original landfall was projected to be north of Tampa, just north of Tampa Bay. And as you know, the hurricanes rotate this way. And so as you see, my cursor goes in towards the coast, and that would go in towards the coast, towards Tampa Bay, if it were to the north. The good news is landfall point is now toward a little bit towards the south of Tampa Bay, which still brings significant storm surge to the south of Tampa Bay, and still brings some storm surge to the north of Tampa Bay, and we are in Tampa Bay, and we don't want to let that go. I mean, we could still see 6 to 8 feet of storm surge possible over in the Tampa region. So again, significant storm surge. Water kills. That's why I put rain and storm surge first today, is because those two are the biggest killers with these storms, not to mention the wind. This is a major hurricane, and it is strengthening, and it will continue to strengthen until that dry air chokes it off. But even then, that's not going to make the storm die out immediately. It's going to slow down, but it's going to still have the rain, wind, storm surge that you would expect it to have. Potential for major hurricane winds here in the pink. Hurricane force winds are possible in the red. Gale force winds in the orange. So again, significant wind expected with this storm. We can see it along southwest Florida here beginning Tuesday evening. Much of the Florida Peninsula by Wednesday morning, all of Florida possible by Wednesday evening, and as I mentioned, Georgia and South Carolina later on. You need to be watching this storm very carefully. Tornadoes are also a concern. Here is the day 2 tornado forecast from the Storm Prediction Center. Today, the threat is basically southern Florida. All of southern Florida is at a 5% risk of tornadoes. Tomorrow, it moves up here, and on day 3, that is Thursday, the threat moves to basically take the Space Coast. And so at this point, again, the Hurricane Center, the Southern Region headquarters are predicting potential for several tornadoes for the southern half of the Florida Peninsula, and a few tornadoes all along the coastlines of Georgia, South Carolina, as well as the northern portion of the Florida Peninsula. So again, tornadoes are also a threat with this storm. It's rain, it's storm surge, it's wind, it's tornadoes. This storm has it all. It's a big one, and it's going to be one that goes down in history. As we see here from these models, these two I'm not sure what's going on with, but as we see almost unanimous consent that this storm will become a Category 4 hurricane here within the next few hours, or probably within the next few hours, and remain that way for about a day or so before beginning to weaken as it makes landfall. Perhaps a little bit of weakening before landfall, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Landfall at this point is somewhere between Naples and Tampa, according to the latest ensemble guidance, or the latest dynamical model guidance here. And as we can see here, a majority brings it very slowly. Again, a day from, so right now it's near Cuba. A day from now, it's going to be just off the coast. In 2 days from now, it's finally making landfall or is a little bit inland. Three days from now, it's in northern Florida. And it's not till 4 days from now, it's up in Georgia and finally leaving South Florida alone. Please note that 3 days from now will be 2 days since it's begun to affect South Florida, and no help can get down to South Florida. It is a peninsula, and so the storm is going to choke off anybody that wants to send relief aid support into South Florida due to this storm. So that is certainly worth noting. That's all for Ian. You guys know the drill. It's a major hurricane hitting the United States. It's going to be the same thing all the time. It's a different location each time, and that's kind of what we're dealing with. Invest 99L could form. I didn't update the graphic, but I did update the chances. National Hurricane Center saying a 60% chance of formation within the next 5 days. Again, Ian, the European takes it into Florida. So does the GFS. No big surprises there. And there's no need for me to spend time beating a dead horse at this point. Our focus is on the impacts to central and central and western Florida, and of course South Florida as well. So basically, anywhere in that south half of the peninsula, especially those on the west side, need to be watching this storm very closely. As you know by now, I would hope. But again, a life-threatening storm, one that will go down in the books as one that people don't forget for quite some time. That's all for now. Chris Sixton with Weather Catholic Media.